Good evening, everybody. We'll get started. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. I think the interest in this issue is further evidence of the passion that parks generate. And I'd also like to welcome those watching this meeting at home on the Marin County Media Center's website. You know, when we met last September with some of you in the first scoping session on the proposal for a parking and shuttle reservation system for Muir Woods, we hit some rough sledding. An idea that was only an idea, a potential parking lot on Panoramic Highway, ignited a great deal of community concern. And some of you may have seen this on the website, but it is now incorrect. Tonight I want to reiterate what we've been saying for the last several months: there will be no parking lot on Panoramic Highway. Let me repeat that. There will be no parking lot on Panoramic Highway. I have shared with Congressman Huffman and Supervisor Sears and Supervisor Kinsey language that we will insert in our general management plan, record of decision, that clarifies language in that document to make this point crystal clear. As you see here, the big red X, no parking lot. So there will be no decisions made here tonight other than this one. And actually, we might have a common purpose here, and that is to reduce traffic and improve the quality of life in the park and in your communities. We have been meeting with the community and the neighborhood groups since last September, and tonight's second scoping session will bring you up to date on the parking shuttle reservation system idea and why it presents an opportunity to greatly reduce traffic and congestion on the crowded roads leading to Muir Woods. The reservation system will also have the effect of reducing traffic to Muir Woods by more than 30 to 50% compared to 2012 levels. We look forward to explaining this in the presentation tonight. My hope is that we ultimately can support the implementation of a reservation system of this type. Without that tool, the traffic will not be reduced. Instead, it would likely continue to increase. I'd like to acknowledge several Marin County elected officials who are here tonight. Mayor of Mill Valley, Stephanie Moulton-Peters, Tom Theodoris, Vice Mayor of Sausalito, and your two Marin County Supervisors, Kate Sears and Steve Kinsey. We'll be hearing from Kate and Steve shortly, but first I'd like to introduce our facilitator for tonight's meeting, Judy Walsh. Judy has years of experience in assuring the great interchange of information and ideas in making meetings around the world. Judy, why don't you just take it away from here and let us know the structure of tonight's important meeting. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you all for coming. As Frank said, I want to just take you a quick walk through the agenda for this evening, starting with the meeting objectives, which are on the screen behind me in front of you. And because I think that's what we all want to accomplish, take a quick read, if you would, of those. And in a minute, we'll go over whether or not those are the objectives that you want to cover.
I think it's important to discuss, will there be a cap, and will it be at the 2005 level as promised in 2005?
Okay, I promise.
I think that if we leave tonight without a solid answer to that question, there's a real problem.
I assure you we'll do that. We'll get to that question and certainly right as soon as the presentation of the plan is finished. The walk through the agenda, we'll start with our elected officials. Yes, thank you. We'll start with our elected officials, as Frank said, that will speak to us quickly about the plan, followed by a presentation by the Park Service people who will take you through the steps of the parking and shuttle reservation system for Muir Woods. During the presentation, if you have questions that you want us to answer after the presentation, I'd like you to take question and answer cards from the Park Service staff who will be at the end of each row. Fill those out as you're listening. Pass them to the end of the row. The staff people will collect them, sort them, bring them up to me, and they will be a part of what we will do after the presentation. Yes?
And for those of us who might like to ask questions not sorted by the Park Service, is there going to be a way to do that?
Yep.
Without breaking the litany?
Well, we want to answer people's questions that come up in cards.
I thought you were a mediator.
No. facilitator.
Facility, you work for the Park Service too.
I'm on a contract for the Park Service for this evening, yes. Thank you. Okay, so elected officials, a presentation, the start of the question and answer period, and when that question and answer period is finished and you've had a chance to ask your questions, Frank will close down the meeting. Okay? Supervisor Sears or Kinsey, would you like to step forward and speak? Yes. Along with the questions and answers after the presentation by the Park Service? They have to be written? Preferable. We'd love you to write them so that there aren't lots of duplications. That's the reason for doing the questions. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your Supervisor, Kate Sears. Thank you all for being here. It's a great turnout. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So I want to start the evening. Congressman Jared Huffman was invited to this meeting but not able to be with us, but he asked me to read a statement on his behalf. So I'd like to do that. So this is from Congressman Huffman. Thank you for taking the time to attend this meeting tonight. I am not here in person, but my staff is here to listen to tonight's discussion. The Park Service has asked us to participate in this public scoping meeting to discuss a proposed reservation system for parking and shuttles to manage traffic congestion and visitation of Muir Woods. I believe everyone here values Muir Woods National Monument and wants to protect this natural treasure, and also understands Muir Woods is a national attraction. I also believe everyone here knows the status quo is simply not acceptable. Traffic is a major source of frustration for residents and visitors alike. And we all agree there is a dire need to manage the access and visitors to and from Muir Woods with a keen focus on protecting this national treasure for others to enjoy for years to come. The first scoping meeting the Park Service held on this topic resulted in a firestorm of protest over the possibility of a parking lot on Panoramic Drive. The Park Service responded, telling us that they heard the objections and would not pursue a parking lot there. Many of us were surprised and unhappy to see language in the general management plan that appeared to keep the door open to the parking lot. The Park Service reiterated this plan had been shelved and has agreed to provide a written statement to attach to the record of decision to the general management plan that declares in clear language that there are, quote, no plans for a parking lot on Panoramic Drive, end quote. I want to thank the Park Service for making this statement and listening to the community on this point of concern. The focus of tonight's meeting is to discuss the reservation system, to hear about the park's proposal and the underlying reasons and analysis of the need for a reservation system. I believe the Park Service intends to reduce vehicle traffic using this tool by 50% overall and by 20% at peak points. An important objective for this meeting is also to understand community questions and concerns about the reservation system. Let's see how the Park Service arrived at their conclusions. This is an opportunity to better understand how the Park Service tracks visitor impacts and learn about their plans to reduce these impacts on this national monument by decreasing traffic. This will improve visitor experiences for local residents as well as those that come from a far distance. Adaptive management will be an important piece of this plan, and increasing control over tour buses that come to this international destination. I'm happy to hear that the Marin County Supervisors are considering ordinances to better control tour bus traffic on our county roads. I believe the Park Service wants to engage the community in a constructive dialogue tonight. This is one of the information gathering steps for the Park Service, but no decisions are being made tonight. There will be additional opportunities for public input, and I urge everyone here to stay engaged in this public dialogue and for everyone to engage in this dialogue with respect and in good faith. The best decisions are made using a thoughtful and inclusive process, and I want to thank all of you in advance for your attention, goodwill, and positive problem-solving skills. I wish you a productive evening. Regards, Jared Huffman, your member of Congress. So I want to add on to that. I think all of us who live in southern Marin feel that on a weekend day with good weather, there's essentially a traffic crisis through our neighborhoods. And that's caused by our visitors to Muir Woods, to the beaches, to our parklands. And we're all particularly, I think, upset by the commercial tour bus operators that really plague our streets and create a dangerous environment on Route 1 with the curves. To me, it's a really important goals are twofold. One is to find a way to manage our traffic problem. We need to take action now. This can't go on longer for all of us who live here. The second is really to take action to deal with our commercial tour bus operators. As Jared Huffman mentioned in his letter, the County Board of Supervisors is in the process of drafting an ordinance that will restrict the commercial tour bus operators. Our county council is looking at exactly what size dimensions we can control on our public streets, and also which streets in our communities should be subject to an entire ban for commercial tour bus operators. So keep tuned. My office, Steve Kinsey's office, is working very closely with our county council to draft an ordinance that will be helpful and address the concerns that we've heard from many of you about our commercial tour bus operators. But we do have a larger traffic problem, as we all are very conscious of and very aware of. And so I'm here tonight because I want to better understand what the Park Service is proposing. I certainly believe that they hope that the reservation system will have an impact on our traffic situation, and I want to learn more about the basis for that hope. So thank you all very much. My apologies to those of you who are standing at the back. There's some seats available at the front if you want to come up and get a really good view of the easels. So come forward, and I look forward to the discussion tonight and hearing everyone's input and your thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. I join with Supervisor Sears in thanking all of you for being here this evening and looking forward to this presentation. I think that everyone in this room, and I want to believe that everyone in this room, knows that we need to do something to reduce the impacts of visitation in Muir Woods. That's why we're here. The issue is how are we going to do it, and to what extent is it going to be done. And I think it was really important that we start a meeting tonight with very clear and explained description from the Park Service that the parking lot up on Panoramic is truly off the table. And I have heard it, I've read it, and I'm going to believe it. And I think it was really important that it be stated from the very onset. So thank you to the Park Service for that. The other thing that I think is important, and it doesn't hurt to say it more than once, Supervisor Sears made clear that she and I, working with our county council, are going to be bringing forward an ordinance to our board that will limit the size and frequency of buses to the extent that we can. We've done our research. We know we have the ability on local roads, not on Highway 1, but on our local roads, to control the size and types of buses that are being used, as Sausalito did, to control noise and amplification on these visiting buses. And we intend to do everything we can to take on that piece of the problem. It isn't the only part of the problem, and I think it's fair to say that Kate and I have worked very closely with our Marin Transit Agency and the Golden Gate National Recreation Area as our equal partner in our Muir Woods shuttle program, and to get more people to use shuttles to get to the park. And we're encouraging the park to consider even more days a year when those shuttles can operate. I am pleased that this year, for the first time, Fort Baker will also be added to the list of locations. So it provides folks an opportunity to get out of their cars and into a shuttle well before they come into the Tam Junction, which I think is the key component of what Supervisor Sears and I believe is an effective transit program. Do not bring buses or people through Tam Junction to get on a bus. The other item that I wanted to bring up is the obvious question about the reservation system. And I've seen a wide range of numbers being thrown around about what a reservation system would do or wouldn't do. I personally have been presented with information, like Congressman Huffman, that makes me believe that a reservation system could be a useful tool in reducing the impact and managing the times when visitors come to reduce the consequences on our communities. But that is really a big part of what tonight and the subsequent comment period is about. So I maintain an open mind, and I encourage others to do the same. I think it's important and imperative, in fact, that the Park Service explain their reservation system, explain the numbers, and explain some of the proposed calculations that have been presented in the community as well. I also think that if a reservation system is a tool, that it will be important to have the opportunity to control traffic on Franks Valley Road. That is something that the county currently controls, and Supervisor Sears and I are committed to having public session at the County Civic Center to discuss this idea before any decisions are made on the part of the county. But I enter this meeting tonight understanding, at least in my own mind, that for a reservation system to work, the Park Service believes that they need to have the opportunity to be involved in control of parking on Franks Valley Road. Greatly reduced over what is currently happening in an ad hoc way, but still allowing for parking on Franks Valley Road. And then finally, I think that it's very important to get to the end of this meeting feeling that it's been successful, that we try our very hardest to be civil, even if we disagree, that we share our concerns in a way that allows for a productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve and Kate. And I just want to echo about the tour buses. It's an issue that we are all challenged with, and it's really good that we're coordinating with cities like Sausalito and Marin County and the park. What we can control is what happens once they arrive at the woods, and we do control the size of the bus. We just actually a few months ago banned the use of PAs on open air buses, and I'm glad to see Sausalito follow suit. And we're coordinating with the county on regulating the buses as they arrive in the park on the county roads. So it's important that we coordinate our efforts. Next, we're going to go to the presentation, the audiovisual presentation, and my colleagues here, Brian Avilas, Jennifer Trudelar, and Darren Brown will be making that presentation. Brian, you want to come up?
Judy, did you want to explain anything about the cards and events? Okay. Good evening. Hi, I'm Brian Avilas. I'm a senior planner here with National Park Service at Golden Gate National. I might need to do that, huh? How's this? Is this any better? Hi, I'm Brian Avilas, a senior planner with National Park Service, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, and I'm glad to be able to share a brief PowerPoint presentation, no death by PowerPoint tonight, about a reservation system for parking and for shuttles at Muir Woods. And Darren's going to keep me on time here. Too often, this is the first experience and the last experience that people have at Muir Woods, and in reality, that's not what we're about. The National Park Service mission is really centered around the stewardship of places like Muir Woods, and we have a long and proud legacy of doing that over 100 years at Muir Woods. We recognize what a remarkable gift it was by the Kent family back in 1908, a gift to the American public, and we take the stewardship mandate very strongly. At the same time, we feel like we can provide for inspirational experiences in the forest, and that's our dual challenge, and we take both of those very seriously. Darren, you just keep me going. And I'll... Okay. I probably will hold this then. So there are 5 parts to this presentation. One, I will cover a sort of a summary and a bit of a background. Darren, Jennifer Trudelar will cover the proposed project. Darren will talk about the project benefits, and then we'll wrap up with a bit of a summary about the schedule and the next steps for the project. At its most basic, we're talking about 3 things in this proposed parking and shuttle reservation system. The first is a reservation system for cars and for shuttles. The second is parking management, which means people on the ground helping people to park at Muir Woods. And the third is a continuation of the Muir Woods shuttle. Those 3 parts work together. A few of the things that we're not here to talk about that have been eliminated from discussion, partly through public scoping comments and partly through continued analysis by the Park Service, are the idea of a parking lot on Panoramic Highway, the idea of using Panoramic Highway to serve the Muir Woods shuttle, and the idea of changing Muir Woods Road or Lower Frank Valley Road into a one-way route, and the idea of possibly using the new parking lot at Muir Beach to reserve spaces for the shuttle. Those are all things that we are not talking about. There are some additional things that we might get to at a future project, and these are related to infrastructure, and these are things at the entrance to Muir Woods. These would be things like improving conditions for pedestrians at the entrance to the woods, further reducing parking along Muir Woods Road or Frank Valley Road, and also reconfiguring some of the parking lots at Muir Woods itself. This is an infrastructure that dates to the 1950s, and it's time for a little updating. But that's a separate project. That's not what we're here to talk about today. The last point in the summary is really that this project has some significant benefits, and they're benefits in terms of reduced visitation. Darren will cover some of this again later in more detail. There's reduced volumes of vehicles, whether you look at it at a daily basis or an hourly basis. And there's also reduced parking on Muir Woods Road, Frank Valley Road. Those are all concrete benefits that we're proposing to implement. Okay, Darren, you can move me along.
Sorry.
So we have been working steadily to try to address visitation and congestion at the woods. This is not something new. As you know, we're in the 8th year of the Muir Woods shuttle, and we've seen that growing. We also have permanent changeable message signs on Highway 1, 2 in the southbound direction, 2 in the northbound direction, and those go on very early on most days. We also have a fleet of no parking signs on Lower Muir Woods Road, and we have an expanded fleet thanks to the county this past January to really try to prevent parking in inappropriate areas that are resource damaging. We also have state parks employees on Muir Woods Road, funded in collaboration with the National Park Service to help people to park in appropriate places and stay out of the inappropriate places. We do have enforcement on the road. It is a county road, and the county sheriff patrols, the state parks patrol, but there's a limit to the amount of resources they can dedicate to that. And there are some jurisdictional issues to work out with the National Park Service having authority to also manage or to cite people who are in areas where they're posted for no parking. One of the things we find, though, is that a lot of the visitors are there for the first time, and they actually consider a ticket at Muir Woods as the price of visiting. So there's an almost inexhaustible supply of new parkers every day. Last thing I'll mention is that we actively encourage people who contact the park to consider going to other places. We know Muir Woods is high on their interest list, but there are other places to visit. We tell them when they can visit and tell them what to expect when they get there. All of these actions, though, sort of leave us in a spot where we're seeing high levels of visitation, increasing visitation, 4,000 plus visitors on every peak season weekend, and our first time when we had 6,000 visitors. That occurred in 2 days last year. So these are levels of visitation that make it very difficult for the Park Service to manage. Back in September, we opened up scoping on 2 projects. One was an infrastructure project. One was the reservation system project. And these are the top comments that we got. They were very focused. They're really focused on Panoramic Highway, Panoramic Highway and carrying capacity, at least for the infrastructure project. For the reservation system project, they focused on, tell us how you might work something like a reservation system. How could that be operational? Tell us about carrying capacity, and also let's understand how this might be integrated with the shuttle service. So we've listened, and we're coming back with a new proposal that follows up on these comments that we heard. Just as part of that, and we know that there's a lot of interest in carrying capacity, I want to make it clear that one of the things that the Park Service did in preparing its general management plan is to evaluate carrying capacity. It's Chapter 7 in Volume 1 of the new General Management Plan. And it looks at indicators and standards. It defines indicators and standards at Muir Woods that will keep our park a wonderful place to visit and protect resources. We started by looking at how we protect the overall health of the forest, and we're doing many things. Over the last 100 years of managing Muir Woods, we've learned how to protect the resources. We've learned how to protect people, how to protect the resources by keeping people on paths, by putting in fencing, by creating boardwalks, by having staff to help people move around, with different programs. We are focusing in the general management plan then on things that are related to congestion in the woods. How do visitors stack up in the woods? Where do they create congestions that aren't enjoyable for a visit? We look at things like people per view. We look at things like encounters on trails. We want to make this a good experience. These are some of the things that we're now bringing into a new performance monitoring program to continue to investigate conditions, monitor conditions in the woods, and make adjustments as we see that. We think that these three parts, a GMP, which gives us indicators and standards, the performance monitoring program, and the parking reservation system can work together to help us to keep in these standards. And with that, I turn this over to Jennifer Trattler.
Thanks, Brian. Can everyone hear me? Great. So we've put a lot of thought into the reservation system, and we believe that there are three critical components for the entire system to work. The first is the reservation system itself, and this is the real shift because currently visitors don't pre-plan their visits. It doesn't require a reservation, and now it would. And we think that this will capture roughly 90% of the visitors to Muir Woods. Right now, about 80% are arriving in their personal vehicles. Another 10% across the entire year are arriving through the shuttles. And then another 10% are arriving in other methods, such as the commercial buses, hiking in, and bicycling in. So our reservation system will be able to capture and control 90% of the population trying to visit Muir Woods. The reservation system would involve both a website plus a call center. And the reservation system is populated with a 365-day set of numbers based on the carrying capacity and those triggers and standards so that we are telling the system each day how many are allowed to reserve spaces. And beyond that, there is no additional parking available and no additional space on shuttles. The second element is parking management, and we're just planning on using existing infrastructure, as Brian mentioned. There's about 150 spaces in our current lots, plus we believe that there are 110 spaces along the roadside that can still be used safely. Right now, road shoulder parking is unmanaged, and on busy days, there can be more than 400 cars parked along a stretch of more than 2 miles. So this would be pulling roadside parking back by almost 70%, down to just 110 spaces that can be placed where there's a buffer to the creek and where there's safe passage for visitors. The parking management also includes a lot of boots on the ground. This is really critical to have a presence there, both to provide assistance to the arriving visitors with reservations to find their parking spot, to ensure that parking is done efficiently, to help people without a reservation turn around, and to have that presence to deter people from just making an attempt to park illegally and leaving their car and going in. The third element is continuing our successful partnership with Marin Transit. It's been going really well. We actually are proposing a slight expansion. We're talking about operating shuttles roughly 140 days per year, which is more than is currently going. The two locations would remain the same. So we're talking about the Pohono Street park and ride lot, and then also a pickup at the Sausalito Ferry Terminal. And we think that the Sausalito connection is really important because our data shows that approximately 40% of visitors to Muir Woods start out their morning in San Francisco. So if we have a connection to the ferry and really promote that, the shuttles meet the ferry, pick up visitors, and take them to Muir Woods, they never even have to get in their car and never even drive across the bridge. They just go point to point from San Francisco to Muir Woods and back. So this next slide is a depiction of the area and also the parking management corridor in blue. So service would be provided along this corridor and this significant presence of boots on the ground that I was mentioning. and also law enforcement, potentially towing, ticketing, that kind of thing. On peak days, the roadside parking can stretch almost all of that length in blue, and the yellow dots that you see behind me are where we believe those 110 spaces can be located. The yellow dots aren't intended to show that there will be contiguous parking in that area, but just to show that within that yellow stretch is where the 110 spaces can be placed, but they will be located specifically with an eye to the creek and safe passage for visitors, so it won't necessarily be a contiguous line. And then this map shows the regional view. I want to be clear that these arrows are just arches. They are not depicting actual roadways. The shuttles currently do not actually go on Panoramic, and they will not in the future, the same as now. So I just want to make sure that that arch doesn't alarm anyone. But you'll see here where the Muir Woods parking is. We're all familiar with that. And you'll also see behind me that that is available 365 days a year. Then you see the 2 shuttle locations, and you see that those are only on or reservable in the system for peak visitation seasons and days. And as I mentioned, that's roughly 140 days. So I just want to be clear that the maximum number of visitation is only on those days when the shuttle is running. On the remainder of the days, which is more than 2/3 of the year, the visitation is much lower than the maximum that can be tolerated by the woods because the shuttle system will not be on. And since you have to make a reservation to come to the woods under this model, the shuttle seats aren't available, visitation is brought down.
Just before Brian speaks, I'd like to remind you all to fill out, and shouldn't have called them the question and comment cards, and pass them to the Park Service people at the end of your rows, so that can be part of what we discuss.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just for the record, my name is Darren Brown. I'm the Parks Transportation Planner. So I'm just going to go over some of the benefits that all of our data is showing that we're going to get out of the system. But just to take a step back and to describe what we have now, it is truly an unregulated system outside of our commercial use authorizations, which are we actually do have permit and put conditions on. The rest of the system is literally at whoever wants to go can go and try to find a parking spot. What that looks like on one of our first 2 6,000 person days last year, as Jenny was describing, was 400 cars on the road, 150 vehicles in our parking lots, our 10 shuttles running at full capacity, and the commercial use authorization. So I just wanted to give you that picture. It's really, it cannot get any more crazy than that 6,000 person day. What the system does, and the way it actually achieves some of the performance that I'm going to show you is, number one, it reduces the amount of parking from about 400 on the road down to about 110, and so that's actually about a 40%, 44% reduction in actual parking supply that can park at Muir Woods. The other thing the reason why we can achieve some of the results is that all the parking spaces of that reduced level that we're going to have out there, we actually don't release all of those in the reservation system. We only release about 85% of those remaining spots. And the reason for that is we made a decision really early on in the planning process that we did not want this to be a timed experience. We didn't want to give somebody space number 110 for 2 hours and you have to be back and rushing it. We want it to be a serene experience where people can enjoy the woods as they're meant to be enjoyed. But the challenge with that is that there's a variation between when people leave and when people come. And to have that ebb and flow, because of that length of stay, we actually have 15% of the spaces always open so that we can have that ebb and flow. And it's critical that we have that. And the last thing is that the flattening of the peak. Right now we see daily about 50% of the vehicles going to Muir Woods within a center 3 to 3.5 hour period. Between about 9:30 and about 1 o'clock, 50% of our visitors come, although the park is open for 12. So what this does is it releases that reduced amount of parking over a longer period of hours. And so what that comes with that is significant reductions in not only daily traffic, but also more significantly peak hour traffic, which is really what you're seeing at a Tam Junction on a weekend, is everybody trying to go to the same place at the same time. Next slide. This is what visitation, people ask about visitation. We were asked to make sure that we talked about visitation, and we would like to. This is the tool reduces visitation in this way. We don't just shave off all days. This is how it is. We have very serious problems, particularly out there in July and August. And this is how, as we shave off those peak days, reduce number of parking, and spread everything out, this is how that visitation is reduced. Next slide. Daily trips, again, by reducing the number of vehicles and increasing the number of people on shuttles, the percentage of people on shuttles, we essentially see over the course of the year. During December and November, we don't see daily because there's no place. We have visitation down at 1,000 or 1,200 and 1,500, and really the flow rate is all right, and the visitation experience is all right. So really what we see is we're reducing visitation where we really have problems out there. Next slide. And again, what we hear most about is, how do you address that issue through Tam Junction? And the next couple slides will deal with that. So peak hour congestion, again, the combination of all these factors starts getting you some pretty significant peak hour changes, and it really comes into focus in the next slide. Go ahead. So this is comparing a typical July or August day, or Memorial Day, a 5,200 person day, which we see a lot in July and August. We didn't choose a 6,000 person day. It's a 5,200 person day without the reservation system. And again, you can see the peak in there. That's how people arrive now without a reservation system. And then the bottom one is a 4,000 person day, which is the max that we would be releasing, spread out over the entire day, and how we would be releasing those reservation spots. What you see is a pace of flow into the woods that we can actually accommodate. People will come up, they can park, they leave, and it's a steady flow. I would say that we didn't put up any line, but what this actually equates to, the hourly flow rate into the Muir Woods, actually equates to a day right now of about 2,800 people per day, which is about a March day. So that is the power of the system. By reducing overall visitation and spreading it out, we can see some amazing results in people going out to Muir Woods. And then next slide. Safety on the road, really the safety concern is about reducing parking, improving the corridors. We're going to be reducing overall parking and make sure that there's enough, put in areas where there's going to be enough room where people can walk from their cars on the road. We're going to calm the overall experience and just have an overall safer situation out there. Next slide. Resource protection, by reducing, it really comes down to reducing of vehicle trips and reducing of footprint. And that comes down to reducing daily trips and reducing the amount of roadside shoulder. A lot of our illegal parking that we see on the shoulder right now is people almost falling into the creek. There are the 110 that we've identified actually have a very good buffer with the creek, and they're very wide shoulders, and they're not directly impacting the creek. These are the spaces that we're intending to use, and we think that by having those reduced trips and a reduced footprint, we're going to have a significant improvement. Go ahead. Next slide. And then last is the visitor experience. The one thing when we hear about Muir Woods is we had an amazing time in the woods. It's magic, and it's absolutely chaos getting in and getting out, and it ruins the experience. We see it again and again, and we absolutely must do something about it. This is really about reducing frustration, taking the remembrance of how people got there, and really have people focus on the woods. And we think that we can do that by reducing visitation and reducing flow. Go ahead. Next slide. And last, this is our NPS proposal. I mean, our proposal is to put something in place that all of our evidence says is going to be a powerful tool at reducing trips to the woods, calming everything down, and reducing impacts on the community. We see the impacts to the community, and we take it seriously. I know that some don't believe that, but really we have tried hard to come up with an approach that can meet goals that we need at the park and to significantly reduce impacts at the community. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian, and you can talk a little bit about the schedule going forward, and then we're going to be done with this.
Thanks, Darren. Just wanted to refresh you about where we are. We had our first scoping meeting about 9 months ago. We're here at the second scoping meeting. We are going to be moving forward. We'll take your comments, and we're going to be moving forward with a revised plan and a document that clarifies or evaluates the environmental impacts. We'll put that out for review. We'll take your comments, and we'll refine the plan and prepare a plan probably in the early fall. At that point, we hope to be ready to bring a proposal to the Board of Supervisors for an agreement about co-management of Muir Woods Road. And then we're looking forward to about almost 2 years of planning to actually stand up the system, and we'll be back in touch with you about the system and how it could operate. There are a number of things that still would need to be ironed out once we complete the project proposal and the environmental analysis. And we pledge to come back to you and talk about how the project's going and listen to you and find ways to continue to improve the project. That's it for the presentation, and I'll hand this over to Judy.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, that ends the formal presentation part, and we go to now, as Supervisor Sears said, engaging in a constructive dialogue. And part of the, and also Supervisor Kinsey added, let's do it productively and as civilly as we can. As a facilitator, my job is simply to work on the process of the meeting. You folks and the Park Service are the people that work on the message or the content of the meeting. So my job is to get as much engagement and dialogue as we can. We want to start with the dialogue by answering and having Park Service people comment on your questions, and work as hard as we can to get everyone's needs met. We know that we said we would stop at 8:30. We often go beyond that, and certainly the Park Service has committed to stay and answer your concerns and questions and comments. Okay? Yes?
There was no discussion in the whole presentation about the cost and use of the proposal. There was also no discussion of whether or not, since you're trying to shade peak demand, why you need to apply it to other times of the year or other times of the day which do not have the same volume of the peak demand coming. You also decided several times the 6,000 per day number.
Okay, Kirsten on my right and Christina on my left are going to take down, synthesize and take down your comments as you ask them, as you state them, and we hope that we will look both at what I have here in cards and what they have on the boards, and we will respond. We'll try to respond to those first. I need your help on making this work so that we are through at a reasonable time. So with your permission, I guess what I want to check is, I know some of you are not happy with the comment part. I need to know how many of you are okay with starting with responding to the questions. Just give me a... Okay, and your worry is, I think your worry is that you won't be heard if you don't do that. Okay, these are yours. These are comments. Okay. Okay, let's give it a shot. Let's look at a few of them and see if they begin to address your concerns. And when you...
That was promised to be answered. I asked at the
Good.
very beginning of the presentation, is there or is there not, please answer the question, is there or is there not a cap at the 2005 level that was promised in 2005 of 750,000 people? An ironclad, hard limit, not to be exceeded, 750,000 people. Yes or no? Because everything you showed me today looks like 4,000 people a day, translation 1.46 million people. Please answer that.
Okay, when we come to that same category, or that same topic on the cards... Do one of you want to answer that?
You want to take that or you want me to?
Are you going to do it?
What is the limit? Because if it's not at the 2005 level, we need to talk.
All right. We want to answer everyone's questions here tonight, but we are trying to get... Listen to me, please.
Can we please let someone speak here?
you're not going to be satisfied if we can't talk and listen to each other. If you just want to yell at us, we're not going to get anything done. We have to work together to solve this traffic problem. So I'll give you some answers as best I can. The issues with the traffic, first of all, the state of the woods itself, has a clean bill of health. The scientists from universities say that the woods are doing fine. As Brian said, there is a capacity of sorts with the general management plan that determines how many people can be in the woods at any one time. The real issue, however, is traffic through this corridor and to the woods. So what we're proposing here is to reduce the traffic. Visitation will drop by 10% over 2012 levels. The traffic will be reduced by up to 50%. So I think you're going to see a dramatic improvement in the quality of the experience and the quality of life. So I just want to, are we trying to get to these cards? Okay.
Where is the answer to the question that Luke asked about the cap of 750,000 people? I heard nothing. I heard no answer to that.
You just, sorry to speak ahead of my curve, you just referred to a scientific study as to what the carrying capacity of Muir Woods was. Where is that study?
What I was referring to is the general management plan criteria that we have. And basically, we have basically, Howard, you can help me out here, or Brian, how this is described. But basically, as part of the general management plan, we had to determine how many people can be at the woods. And the way we get to that, and it's really not a function of meadows or streams, it's really, as Brian outlined on there, it's noise, it's crowding, it's perceptions of crowding, it's experience. The same thing, let me finish. Yosemite just went through this, and they were sued 3 times, and it was eventually proven in court and prevailed, and they said basically it's not about the meadow so much, it's about the crowding, the experience, and the traffic infrastructure. And that's the way to control it. You cannot really show a nexus to a spotted owl nest or a salmon. It's really about how many people can come in and out. That's what we're trying to manage here. And if you're reducing traffic by 50%, it's going to get better. The woods will be better, your quality of life will be better.
How did you arrive? You asked about, what I asked is carrying capacity research that you just quoted.
So, can I add? Can I add a little bit as we broach this topic for the general management plan? We did look at all the resources. We didn't just jump right to congestion and people in the woods. There is a lot of science behind a lot of investigations that were done in the early 2000s to about 2009, which asked questions about all the natural resource conditions in the woods. And I've got Mia, who she'll help me if I forget anything, but they were looking at the salmon, they were looking at water quality, they were looking at vegetation. All of these things were considered, and we asked ourselves, well, what do we really need to manage? There's a summary report of all of that research that was provided by the National Parks Conservation Area, or National Parks Conservation Association, NPCA. They gave us a report card that this is the health of Muir Woods, according to all these other metrics, looking very strongly at the natural resource conditions. From that, we said, well, what do we really need to attack? And we came up with about 5 things. We need to attack meaning what do we really need to monitor in terms of visitors at the woods? And there were creation of social trails, additional noise, incidences of invasive species, and then these concerns about when do we have too many people in the woods? When do we have too many people on the trails? When it detracts from the experience? The issues of like the health of the trees, which I know somebody has been trying to say that, you know, the foot traffic over the tree roots, that's really very, very well managed. I mean, we have very well-defined trails. We have boardwalks in our most sensitive areas. We manage those things very well. So it comes down to the impacts of visitors are not those that you might otherwise suspect. It's
Where did the 4,000 number come from?
so let me tell you the 4,000 number, and I myself had to get sort of carrying capacity 101 on this, but the researchers looking at congestion, right? Looking at how people move through the woods and where they stack up.
It's about the trees.
But it's not. Let me let Mia, who is day to day at the woods.
Thank you for bringing up how this actually impacts the trees, because I learned something very special in March when we had world-class scientists come to Muir Woods for the BioBlitz. And for 24 hours, these world-famous scientists studied everything. And in front of an international audience, they said the trees are robust and growing at a better rate than they ever had, according to many metrics. They also, while they were in Cathedral Grove, arguably the most visited grove of redwoods in the world, the trees that they were climbing with 49 different species of lichen, the Cooper's hawks were nesting nearby, a very sensitive species, the pileated woodpeckers were nearby, the otters have returned, the coyotes have returned, the fox have returned. The health of the forest is robust. So thank you for focusing us on what really is important, that we're taking good care of the forest. And with one significant exception, which is the salmon, we all share the worldwide plight of the salmon. There are people in this room whose careers are devoted to restoring the habitat for salmon from where it flows on the top of Tam through Muir Woods out to Muir Beach. That's where most of the money from our entrance fees go to. That's where most of our work in our nurseries are dedicated. That's what we just accomplished at Muir Beach. That's where most of our attention is focused, because we too care about the health of the salmon. That is why you heard us repeat again and again that removing the parking from the roadsides in the riparian corridor and a robust restoration of the riparian corridor like we are doing in Muir Woods and in Mount Tamalpais and at Muir Beach is of critical importance to us. We care about that. That's the core of it. But the redwoods are doing really well. That's the good news there, and we want to continue that. All of you know how rigorous the controls are in Muir Woods. You cannot go off the trail. We have quiet zones in Cathedral Grove. We close at night. We are very, very rigorous about our protections. So thank you for refocusing this, even though we do want to limit visitation because we care about your experience as well.
Can we see that?
Thanks, Mia.
Could you ask the people in this room who work so hard? We have our state park colleagues, we have our conservancy colleagues, we have our national park colleagues. They're here because they care.
Let's give them a big hand. Mia's right. These are the people that work very hard for you. Okay, in all fairness,
That report is available. It's on our park website and National Geographic's and the Conservancy's website.
thanks, Mia. In all fairness to all of your colleagues who are here this evening, we have lots and lots of questions that many of you have kindly filled out. We've shown that we've listened to some of you who are not have questions, and now we think it's only fair that the people who were kind enough to express their needs and concerns on questions also get some time. So I'm going to start with some questions and see if your things get covered. No, we're going to go to questions now. What is the parking lot? While the parking lot on Panoramic is off the table, what about parking, bus staging, and development for your friends, neighbors? You folks have had an opportunity to speak without questions. A number of your neighbors, your users, the people who are also here, have asked to be heard by questions. They deserve some time as well. So let's do 3 questions, and then we will go back to a comment. It's only fair to look at the stack of questions that we have. So those of you that did questions, let's do this as productively as we can with a little bit of both as a way to work together. This is a question about Muir Beach. While the parking lot on Panoramic is off the table, what about parking, bus staging, and development for visitor services at Muir Beach? And Brian will answer that one. Oh, you have a mic.
Yeah, I think we did consider that as a possible option. It's no longer being considered. The bus lot or the parking lot was intentionally designed not to accommodate buses. We did not want for example, the Muir Woods shuttle or the West Marin stage to potentially get caught in traffic. We don't think that that's a good option, so we're no longer considering that.
Thanks, Brian. Why would they propose a visitor center at Tam Junction when it is already so congested? That's yours as well.
We're no longer considering a visitor center as something that's elaborate. We do look forward to being able to, I think there was, back in the CTMP days, there was the idea that there would be a multi-level garage in that area. We're not promoting that. The only thing, if you look in the general management plan that we're talking about, is some improvements to where we pick up people at for the Muir Woods shuttle. So there's no bathroom there, there's hardly any shade. These are the kind of things that we think we could make some improvements on, but there's no plan for a visitor center at Manzanita or Pohono.
Can I go a step further with that? Just so that I'm a little bit more involved with the shuttle operation. So let me just clarify that. Our Marin Transit partners actually got a grant because they wanted to be able to have a situation at Pohono that was a little bit better than just people standing under an overpass. They actually got a grant for, I believe, $400,000 to just create a shelter, a nice little shelter that can hold about 20 people under it. That is the extent of the discussion that we are planning at that location. There is nothing as far as services other than just to get people out of the sun to stage for Muir Woods at that location.
I like the concept of a Muir Woods reservation system, but will it allow some spontaneous visits when there are few visitors, for example, at 7 a.m. on a rainy morning, or will I have to have reserved 6 months in advance? And I think Jenny will take that.
Yeah, sure. If I stand, then I can't speak into this microphone, so I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. Okay, great. Hi. We believe that the system needs to be on 365 days a year, or else there will be confusion amongst visitors, there will be confusion amongst concierges or travelers or tourist bureaus about whether or not you really do or do not need a reservation system. However, we are still in the conceptual phase. We're seeking feedback. We're here asking you for your feedback, and we're still working with our consultants and in our internal team to craft this vision. So it's certainly not decided yet for sure. And one of the things that we are thinking about is there an opportunity at the end of the day when visitation isn't at peak levels to potentially offer an opportunity to come without a reservation at 7 p.m. For the last hour the park is open. So those are the kinds of things that we're still thinking about.
Will there be an ironclad cap on attendance at the 2005 levels of 750,000? Frank, you want to get that? Sure.
So, like we said at the outset, we're not making any decisions tonight. We're here to listen to you, and I hear that question. As I said earlier, we're looking at how we can manage this reservation system to bring down the peaks. As I said, the visitation will come down as projected, at least in this initial design we're looking at. The traffic will come down 25 to 50%. Visitation will come down at the peak time 10%. Now, what we're looking at is how do we manage the shoulder seasons? I know there's concern about spillover into the shoulder months, the non-summer months, if we are, really, sort of giving those peaks a haircut there, like what happens in September and October. And that's one thing we're exploring as to how we manage that to make sure that that does not go up too high. So I don't have a specific answer for you at this point, but we're listening. We're trying to figure out how to make this work.
I have another question that may have already been answered, I'm not sure. So, Jen, as I'm reading this one, you can say, how will traffic of people who do not have reservations be handled? I think you've, okay, because we don't want to be redundant. Where will they go when they are told they can't park? And my feeling is they will end up lost in the local neighborhoods and so on, parking illegally and so on.
I can answer that question. I will plan to sit unless you guys need me to get the mic to stand up. Okay, here it is. Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Basically, we see this as needing quite a bit of advanced notice to a variety of groups. We imagine that there will be a full-on informational campaign for probably more than a year before the system is actually implemented. We know that we will need to involve tourist bureaus and provide training and sort of an update to concierges that are currently right now assisting people that are tourists visiting Muir Woods with how to get there and when to go. There are other reservations in the nation, reservation systems in the nation that work, so we just think that it's going to be a matter of getting a lot of information out in advance. But then we acknowledge that that first year, it may be bumpy. We may have some people that still just don't know or still want to kind of test how it's going to work or see if there's really enforcement. And that's why it's so critical for us to have boots on the ground. So there's going to be a very strong staff presence to assist people with finding their parking space. You'll interact with a staff person and understand how, okay, you have a reservation, there's spaces in the annex lot, just take the next right. You don't have a reservation, I'm sorry, you'll have to continue on, and there will be places where you can safely turn around. There will be law enforcement, additional law enforcement from where we are now to take care of anyone that may take it to a level where it becomes a law enforcement action. We're working with the county as we draft our shared management of this road to make sure that we consider the ability to tow vehicles. So we certainly hear your concern about making sure that cars aren't just going to be lost in your neighborhoods. We will be working to craft that informational campaign, and I think we'll just need to keep in mind that concern and make sure that we try and address it as we're working on that.
Another very important question, thank you. How is all of this being funded?
That's me again. Did you want me to take that, Brian, or was that okay? Great. So we have a dual goal to ensure that this project can be financially sustainable while at the same time not pricing out both visitors or community members that want to come to Muir Woods. So we have been talking about this reservation system, and the new cost that is introduced is a parking fee. Right now, the shuttle does have a fee. It's currently $5, but parking, as you know, is free and then also unmanaged. So we're talking about introducing a parking fee. In the fall, at the public meeting, we said it might be in a range of $7 to $15. We still don't actually have the final numbers because, as I mentioned, we're in the conceptual level. We're listening to you. We're working with our financial consultant to build the model to understand what the cost expectations will be. So we will certainly come to a specific price as we continue refining the system and making our projections. But the parking reservation fee is critical to cover the cost of the holistic system. So those staff that I keep referring to, the cost of operating the website and the call center, the additional law enforcement that's needed to make this work. Our dual goal does not have anything to do with aspiring for a surplus of revenue. We've hired a third-party financial consultant to help us build this model so that we can make sure we arrive at a place that covers the financial sustainability of the system, but not to arrive at a surplus of funding for the National Park Service.
When will you be conducting a similar meeting format to address the public concern over the dog management plan currently being enacted?
So the question was, when will we be conducting a similar format meeting to deal with concerns over the dog management plan? Let me give you just a quick hit on that.
Entire question as you just read it?
Oh. Read the question.
When will you be conducting a similar meeting format to address the public concern over the dog management plan currently being enacted? So the dog management plan is not being enacted. It's still a planning process. We've completed the second draft environmental impact statement. We received thousands of comments. That comment period closed last February. The next thing that will be sent out, again for public review, robust public review, will be a draft rule. And that will come out sometime late this fall. And at that time, we'll be making another round and giving people an opportunity to express their opinions about it.
Sir, when will the public comments that were put on the website be available for the public review? Otherwise, it's not a public comment.
Yeah, no, we're still evaluating the comments we received from last February, the thousands of them. Well, they'll be posted between now and the rule, and you'll have a chance to see them.
Will it be posted right before the rule, or will it be ample time?
There should be ample time.
Now, are all of them going to get posted, or just the ones that you deem necessary?
All of them will be posted.
Why is a commercial dog walking permitting program being implemented now before the dog management?
So the now we're here to really talk about the Muir Woods system, and I'm happy to stay. Excuse me. I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to stay after the meeting and stick around. We'll talk about it after the meeting.
I think there were you heard lots of clapping about people who want to continue about Muir Woods. What is the status of the Manzanita Visitor Center?
I think we just we answered that a little bit earlier. There is no proposal for a visitor center.
Have there been any studies on where the majority of publicity promoting the woods is coming from? And maybe there should be an effort to contact publication outlets and request promoting of other areas.
The Muir Woods website, if you take a look, we offer 7 tips from rangers on visiting Muir Woods. And as much as we would love to have everyone see the redwoods there, we actually suggest that you consider one of the other wonderful redwood resources in Marin County, possibly Samuel P. Taylor. If you're down in San Jose, we suggest the Santa Cruz Parks. If you're in the East Bay, we suggest Redwood Regional Park. If you're going to the wine country, we recommend Armstrong Redwoods. Then we move on to talk about the quieter times of year, the quieter times of day. We suggest riding the shuttle, etc. So our own website actually promotes other options so that you can see the redwoods without overcrowding Muir Woods. We work very closely with the Marin Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Bureau, ditto for all of them in the Bay Area. We've taken Jenny's suggestion on trying to make as much outreach to concierges, tour operators. If you take a look in all the local Sausalito magazines, etc., you'll see us trying to redirect people in more sensitive ways. We really want people to visit, but we want you to consider other resources to do that.
What outreach was conducted for the general management plan, and how many comments were considered?
The general management plan started in 2005, and there was really extensive. Yeah, it is a long time ago, but we started with a mailing list. I got here in 2006. I inherited a mailing list of already 4,000 names. We were in a paper sort of society at that point in time. We started a constant contact mailing list, which has now grown to over 3,000 names. Correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha, maybe 2,000 names. Getting overambitious. But we've also maintained communications through our paper mailing list, even though we've retired that for other projects. So we think we're reaching upwards of 4,000 or 5,000 people with this. We have been sending periodic sort of like substantive newsletters. I think we mailed maybe 6 of those at intervals between 2005 and 2011. We've also had numbers of postcard mailings, and when we did the postcards, we also sent emails with that same information, keeping people apprised of where the general management plan was. We also, at all of our quarterly meetings throughout the park, San Mateo County, San Francisco, and Marin, had sessions expressing or about the GMP. So that's 4 meetings at least a year, all on the subject of the general management plan. We also had specific meetings in certain communities. Some of you were at a meeting in Muir Beach to talk about the general management plan. So there was a ton of outreach. There are also lots of communications with stakeholder groups, some of which we meet with infrequently, but plenty of opportunities to talk about the general management plan. This has been a really serious campaign to try to get the word out and get information.
Excuse me, sir, there were 541 comments considered for a radical change in enabling legislation for the park purpose.
Well, there were 540, there are 561 commenters that we heard. And we don't, that is on the draft environmental impact report and no, that was on the draft GMP. It's interesting to note that even when we released, if you go back to 2010, we released newsletter 4, which I imagine some of you got. We asked people, hey, these are the alternatives that we're considering. I hate to take up this much time about the GMP, but we asked for input on this, and we got about 1,100 comments on that. So actually, when we came out with our general management plan, the draft, we thought we had already established a good trajectory for the GMP. So I sometimes this is, we can't. I think it's. There were 541 comments on the draft. That's not the only comments on. There were but those were comments that were received during a comment period on the draft general management plan.
So the general management plan was in process for years. We had dozens of meetings where it was an agenda item. We had hundreds and hundreds of people pay attention to it. We've had a number of people, few of you in this room, I should say, who are concerned that it represents some kind of radical departure in the direction for the park. We've heard from many more people that it does not represent that. So this is the state of kind of the exciting planning environment we live in the Bay Area. And yes, we get 17 million visitors a year who enjoy recreation in every conceivable way. That's a centerpiece of the park. It has been, always will be.
Why is the park group saying you're going to provide a national park experience to the visitor? If you change the enabling legislation on your very page.
No, that's not the case. We're going to have to agree to disagree on that. So we'll have to return to questions about the Muir Woods plan.
How do we get community input if you're just going to ask questions up there and homogenize and twist it to suit the Park Service? How are we going to get community input right here tonight?
Well, I think we're getting community input both in comments and from.
Questions and your voice, your guys are getting up and
How does the reservation? This is a good one. How does the reservation system stop visitors who don't have a reservation from continuing to drive up and clog up Route 1? And there's a second question. Why not pursue a shuttle from point to point, that is, from San Francisco to Muir Woods?
Can I see that card, just so I make sure I get both parts? Okay. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. So the reservation says, how do we stop people from going up? We don't have a gate. It's a shared road, and so we do not have a gate. It is really going to be about outreach, and also signs on the leading up to the system. It is going to be a cultural shift for people. People assume now that they can go, but we are going to have to make that shift. We expect it to take a few years. Just like everything, it's going to take a little time. But we think we're going to be able to get there because we are going to have a significant marketing campaign.
Make any kind of a proposition on the number of reservations. You don't have a cap. I mean, you got to do the math. You have to know how many people you can stand before you. How are you going to the number of reservations? How are you going to deal with it? How are you going to deal with the number of buses? If you know how many people you can take, then you can deal with this.
And we do, and I think that was, if that's not clear, hopefully we can get there. We do. Chapter 7 of the GMP has a chapter called user capacity. We have a model that ties together the performance, the indicators in there. We have a a visitation flow model done by the preeminent national expert on flows for the National Park Service. We've tied that together with capacity in the reservation system. We know how many parking spots and shuttle spots we can actually put out in the reservation system to keep a flow rate coming in that actually meets our GMP performance standards. Say that again?
Is that an independent study?
No.
Monitoring study, not a
That's an important question.
A monitoring study?
a monitoring study, not a capacity study.
I don't think that's right. We have a requirement in the general management plan. It is a national requirement. It's a legal requirement to have a user capacity study as a part of the GMP. It was done, and it was done by the most experts of visitation in the whole country.
So can you answer this question? How can Muir Woods handle a 53% increase in visitors? That's what you're proposing.
It's not. No, I'm not sure. We can go back through the numbers if you would like. This reservation system will not increase visitation. It will reduce visitation.
What specific steps is the National Park Service going to take to be good stewards of Muir Woods? Is that yours?
Muir Woods does generate a lot of money. It's supporting our shuttle. It's supporting restoration of a robust system at Muir Beach. It's supporting staff providing interpretive tours. And we also have a very robust monitoring system that is tracking spotted owls, salmon, etc. We're working very closely with the state parks on renewing, regenerating all the trails surrounding Muir Woods so that they are sensitively placed and well-maintained coming in. We are working, starting with Muir Beach up through Muir Woods, on restoring the riparian system that is so essential to the salmon and migratory birds. Everything we is done with strict environmental compliance. If you haven't been to Muir Woods in a while, you will be pleasantly surprised at how teeming with life it is these days, all done with our professional biological staff. So those are the measures that we're taking. I would like to also take a moment to give you some hard facts here. This card was handed to me. We had an interesting experience happen in the late 1980s when we were finally able to keep track of our current visitation. Prior to the late 1980s, it was a very random system of traffic counters and the rubber things that you go over, and we really didn't know how many people were visiting Muir Woods, so we did rough ballpark counts, rough multipliers, and we said that we thought there were several million people visiting. Now, thanks to the way we collect our fees and very strict auditing and everybody being counted, that's how we're able to come up with much, much more accurate counts of how many people visit each day, each hour, each month, and those are the statistics that we're now using. So that was one of the cards that came up, was why sometimes people come up with figures from the 80s of 7,900 people per day. That's an old figure from very rough counting methods, and now we have a much better way of keeping track.
Thank you. Brian, you had a second part to the question you wanted to answer? Darren did. Oh, Darren had a second part.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We got caught up on that first one. Why not pursue a shuttle from point to point that is from San Francisco to Muir Woods? We have looked at point-to-point service. The challenge with it is cost. If you run things direct from San Francisco, we already have tour buses actually that come from San Francisco, and the price point is about $50. We could add more of those shuttles ourselves, and the price point would be very similar. But really what happens is if you're going to try to make up for that through parking, really you end up charging people $20 or $25, $30 for a parking space in order to pay for a shuttle that goes into San Francisco. So we really do not want to price out families for the sake of running point to point. We think there is another market through the ferry and also through some of the tour operators. Yeah.
I have lived in Muir Beach for 35 years. During this time, there have been seasonal and mudslides closing Highway 1 and the other road into and out of Muir Woods. How will the reservation and transportation system address these naturally occurring events?
You know, this is really a challenge because Muir Woods, Muir Beach, Stinson Beach are all served by that circuitous, narrow, windy Highway 1, and we've all lived through slides, we've all lived through Caltrans maintenance projects, and at least as far as Muir Woods goes, there's two ways in, and we're used to dealing with the challenges of coming in one way, controlled traffic, so it's just one of those things that we have to live with. And you've seen all the different tools that we've had to use over the years to work with Caltrans and the county to bring people safely in and to redirect traffic or even limit traffic. So unfortunately, we're all in that together. It's a challenging situation.
Will there be some kind of signage on Highway 101 before Mill Valley indicating that there's no access to Muir Woods without a reservation? You need to capture cars and turn them around before they arrive at Tam Junction.
One of the most surprising things I've seen is how effective those CMS signs that go on every weekend that says Muir Woods parking full, use the shuttle. When they're on, everybody pulls off and every shuttle bus is full. We went from 10,000 riders 8 years ago to 75,000 riders today. The Muir Woods shuttle is amazingly effective as soon as those signs go on. We've had a few malfunctions over the years. When the signs aren't on, no one rides the shuttle. As soon as we fix it, the shuttle buses are full. So we want to employ techniques like those CMS signs. We now have 40% of our visitors making plans via the internet before they come to Muir Woods, so we want to really make that a robust system. We want to use all those modern tools to get to people ahead of time and shift the way they plan their visit to Muir Woods. It's been amazingly effective.
Regarding the proposed parking fee of $7, $15, how much does it cost now to enter the park, and is there a plan to increase the entrance fee?
Right now, it's a $7 per person fee for adults to enter the park, and it's actually a $5 federal fee, and there's a $2 temporary fee that we added when the state parks were going to be closed. So that's a temporary fee. We're not sure how long we'll run that, maybe another 2 years, and we'll see. There is a potential for a federal fee increase next year. We don't know, but we did get some signals from Washington a few weeks ago that they might be willing to, all across the country, they're considering raising fees. They haven't been raised at all since 2008, but we don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that is a potential. So again, it's $7 per person. What we have to be mindful of, though, is, as Jenny talked about in the cost for parking, shuttle, reservation, plus these entrance fees that we've traditionally had, we have to be careful of the price point and make sure we can cover the cost for the system, but also not price people out. So there can be some modulation of the federal fees if it gets to be too steep. Okay.
If it costs $5 or $7 to get in, and parking would be $7 to $15, the parking could be as much as 3 times the cost of just getting in. And I think there's a lot of concern about whether the Park Service is looking at this as a revenue-enhancing process. So if you could speak to the value proposition of having parking be greater than, in some possibilities, 2 or 3 times greater than the admission price.
Well, I think the reason Washington is considering raising the fees across the country right now is that there's been several studies that show that the parks are probably underpriced across the country. Now, these are, again, public lands, but when you look at the cost of everything else that's gone up or the value of that experience, it probably is a raise is worth being considered. We're not going to make any money on this proposition. Probably the sweet spot for the parking fee is about $10. Now, ironically, it's free to park, but you have to pay for a shuttle now. So that seems to be in reverse order what we should have. We should actually, if you're going to drive your car there should be a cost to that. And that's really what sort of underwrites the cost of this whole concept we're talking about tonight. We're not going to be, Again, we're a nonprofit operation. We're the government. We're not trying to make money on this. This is not a revenue center, but we do need to. We can't subsidize it as well. We have to find that sweet spot of what it's going to cost to operate.
Will you be?
Sorry. Follow-up, but I'll take it. I'll let Jenny talk about that, but there would be a contractor that would run the reservations.
So let me just clarify that. Similar to how Marin Transit has an operator that they've contracted with to drive their buses, the Park Service too intends to contract with an operator to run the website, call center, and then also staff on the ground. But let me assure you that in any situation where a contract is let, an operator is operating in contract with the National Park Service, just like with the County of Marin, there's a great deal of oversight. We retain the control over pricing, and we retain the control over their operations with a very rigorous program of monitoring, evaluation, and so on and so forth.
Can I just really quickly, sorry Frank, we will also retain the flow rate of tickets out. So it's not, once we hand over and have a contractor on board, we still will retain the ability to manage the number of tickets released.
This next one card was for me. I'll field it anyway. It was, will you be willing to initiate a Citizens Advisory Commission to interface with the communities directly affected by changes in visitation paradigm for Muir Woods and the rest of GGNRA? We did have a Citizens Advisory Commission for 20 years in the park, and they are chartered by Congress, so it would take an act of Congress literally to create something like that. But what we could do, and obviously as we see tonight here, the interest in the park and the concerns of communities like Muir Beach, Stinson Beach, Mill Valley, Tam Valley that are bordering the park, obviously we can do better as far as communicating with you and working with you, and we'll consider some sort of a different communication approach. You know, it's interesting. We have some meetings that we have 3 to 4 workshops a year where we go over all of our issues, and we have fairly light attendance. But then we have a hot issue, and we have overflow capacity here. So finding that again, that sweet spot of what makes sense and what we need to do. We're open to that. We know we could do better, but we also know we're fortunate to have the park. I believe you think that's the case, and sometimes we may be creating some traffic for you, but the fact that we are able to live and work in this beautiful place, I think is something we have to be appreciative of. I guess there's one more here. Will NPS be in control of all Frank Valley Road traffic? Darren, I don't know, maybe you can answer that better than I can.
So the reason why we've gotten a couple of questions on why we feel we should be in control of management and enforcement of Muir Woods Road. The fact of the matter is we don't really want to. We are Frank Valley Road. Why we would want to have that, we really don't. It's really a matter of it's our visitors. We feel like we need to be able to manage it. The reservation system will not work unless we can also make sure that people cannot go outside of the system and essentially still fill up the road. We need the ability to enforce, manage, and control that access. Otherwise, it will be a complete bust and it will not work, and we will continue to see the traffic flows. So we're willing to do it. I wouldn't say we want to do it.
I think there might be a different concern there, and that we won't be restricting the free access between, say, Muir Beach and Mill Valley. That's not one of the objectives. It'd still be a public roadway.
Yeah, I'd like to add another comment about that. Franks Valley Road, Muir Woods Road are county-maintained roads. The county is not going to turn over the responsibilities for the road. We're going to enter into some kind of agreement about managing the road, conceivably. But we are going to continue to retain our authority over the road, and we're going to monitor success. This is, again, assuming that we do go forward. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, Supervisor Sears and I say this together, that we intend to hold public meetings before we make any final decision on that agreement.
Where we are, that's important to me. that they're here where we can come at night.
So the question is whether we would hold meetings down here. And, I would ask Supervisor Sears, I think that we would be happy to come and have some kind of meeting in the local community before we have any formal meetings at the county.
Why do you think 4,000 is okay? Now we have a horrible peak traffic. If you promote 4,000 per day, we will have horrible traffic all day.
So hopefully I tried to explain that in the presentation. Really, the way we've learned that daily visitation, annual visitation, it is important. It is not nearly as important as hourly visitation. The reason why you're down there in Tam Junction stuck in traffic is because everyone's going to the same place at the same time. That's really what we've been focused on. How can you not only reduce visitation, but also manage it so that it can actually be at a reasonable level? I will say this, that people hear 4,000 and they want to immediately think that that's going to be the way it is every day. We do not envision, actually it's impossible for it to even get to 4,000 people per day. We will only be running the shuttles for about 100 days at the beginning of the system. We've been discussing how high could it go. The max that we would ever run the shuttle is about 140 days. That means all of those other days literally will not have the capacity to get anywhere near 4,000, as well as the fact that there's simply rainy days, weekdays, March days that are just not going to have nearly that level of visitation. So we don't see any way possible that it could possibly, actually there is no way that we would do it because we're not going to release that many tickets.
Where did the number come from?
It really kind of, do we want to?
GMP. Oh, yeah, that's her question.
Well, I think the number has been.
That was my question. Can I follow up with it? I live on Shoreline, and I take it out my driveway during the peak traffic. So I have buses parked out in front partying, and I can hear people's music. It's really insane. And it's every weekend, it's from March, January. It just gets worse in July. So when you talk about spreading it out through the whole day, that means I can't leave or get in ever. So that's what I look at. It's really nice there's a park there, but there's a whole bunch of us that live here. And so I'm not that concerned about everybody having such a wonderful experience in the park. I think maybe it should have a higher price and less people go so that this place doesn't turn into Disneyland.
I don't know if there was a question in there, but I think we all heard your comment. 4,000, there is a confluence of our indicators and standards for congestion, for crowding, for quiet, that point to a range somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 people in the park. That's right. That's what I'm telling you where we got that from. So we don't want to have that many visitors in the park. What we tried to do is identify that as a transportation capacity as a planning tool. So this is not something that's fixed. It's not a target for us to try to achieve on every day. This is something that allows us to start to describe a system and understand that we should be holding visitation to within that range as a maximum. We shouldn't have a transportation system that has the capacity to serve 5,000. We want something that's slimmer, that's more refined than that. So this is the 4,000, 3,500 to 4,000 that we've talked about is a planning tool that we're talking about to start and to initially consider how this might work.
This is a related question, so I think you may want to add it into the conversation that you're having. How will you work with / control the private buses that sell tickets so that you keep to the correct number?
So as we've built the system, while the reservation system will only actually capture those people that are driving privately, as well as taking the shuttle buses, the numbers have been built into the system to make sure that we're looking at total visitation. We're not just blind to the remaining 10% that arrive by methods other than private vehicle and the shuttle system. The park does currently manage the commercial carriers. We recognize, we've heard a lot of feedback recently, just like the county representatives have, on a lot of the problems that you all are experiencing. We, within our footprint as the National Park Service, respond to concerns about the commercial carriers by adding in stipulations into the commercial use authorizations that commercial carriers are required to get if they enter into Muir Woods. And so, as we mentioned earlier, based on feedback from the community and people's experiences that were very negative with PA systems, we just recently, for this year, added in a new stipulation that PA systems are banned. However, our control is unfortunately rather limited to our footprint, so that is why we're collaborating with the county on their beefing up of ordinances and so forth, so that we make sure that our policies are aligned, and so that where they go, we can make sure that our authorization stipulations follow, and to make sure that they're dovetailed, so that we can support the county in better managing the buses outside of the areas where we actually have the literal control.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, that was my question. I was actually talking about the number of tickets that are sold by the private companies. How are you going to coordinate so that you have, we're waiting to hear what the cap is, but how you have that cap working with these commercial?
That is where we have this 365-day model where we will retain the control to adjust the numbers that are released by the system based on the reality that we see. So we're taking our best projections, which include what we have now as the data of who is riding those buses, what number of people are riding those buses. And as we move forward with the system, if we see that our indicators and standards are being triggered, if we see that crowding hasn't been addressed, we can also then work within the system to make sure that we are releasing numbers in the reservation system that achieve our goals. We're taking our best attempt, but if we find that there's a condition in the future that isn't achieving the end goal, we have that ability to make minor adjustments.
Okay, it's allowing more people.
Is NPS confident that reducing the Muir Woods Road parking from 400 to 110 vehicles will bring the NPS into compliance with the Endangered Species Act by avoiding harm to salmon?
We too are really concerned about the future of the salmon and realize that their steep decline is caused by many, many, many problems, a few of which are happening in the watershed. And as was stated earlier, the only parking that will be on the road has a sufficient riparian or streamside buffer. And we're also in the process, as we have been the last 10 years, of reconfiguring the parking lots at Muir Woods to have an adequate vegetative buffer. We have a very, very strong nursery program that's revegetating and really improving that buffer. And we take the Endangered Species Act very, very seriously. We have 3 endangered species in our watershed, and it's a major, major focus for us to make sure that owls, well, we have 4, spotted owls, frogs, steelhead, and salmon have the very, very best habitat there. We're very proud of that, and that's one of the things that we take the most seriously. As we learn about what else we can do, I'm sure we'll make continuing adjustments because that's such a priority.
Could I just follow up?
Sure.
That happened to be my question. My name is Chris Carr. I'm an attorney at San Francisco. My name is Chris Carr. I'm an attorney at Morrison Forster in San Francisco, and I represent the Mount Tam Task Force. That was my question. Thank you for your answer. I just wanted to, I think we've gotten into a good rhythm here. People's questions are getting answered. So I want to thank the Park Service for that. But I just want everyone to be assured that the Mount Tam Task Force focus is on the integrity of Muir Woods, its environment, the visitor experience, and the ecosystem surrounding it, particularly Redwood Creek. So we're going to be focused like a laser on whether what the Park Service and the county does addresses the habitat needs of the salmon. I talked about the Endangered Species Act. We could also add in the Clean Water Act. And then we're looking forward to working with the county as well as with the Park Service to try to get our concerns addressed. But I've been tasked with evaluating legal options for challenging the general management plan that comes with that. I'm not putting that out there as a threat. As I said, we're actually looking at working closely with County Council Supervisor Sears and Supervisor Kinsey, and we look forward to meeting with Superintendent Dean and seeing if we can get these very, and I think everyone appreciates these are very heartfelt concerns. And one of the things we want to do, I spoke with Supervisor Kinsey for the meeting, we want to make sure we all have the same data set to work from, that the math is agreed upon. And I'm comfortable that if we can get together on the same data set, let the data do the talking, it still may be that we have philosophical differences at the end, and that's fine, that's democracy. But at a minimum, we want to see the documents, get on the same page data-wise, and have these discussions. So thank you.
I think Mia wants to add something.
You just reminded me when you called yourselves the Mount Tam Task Force that to provide adequate habitat for the salmon and the other endangered species is going to take a watershed approach. You've heard tonight about the very strong collaboration with Mount Tamalpais that surrounds Muir Woods. MMWD is a very significant landholder. And as you know from those of you in the room, many of you are residents within the watershed. So we're all going to have to shoulder our responsibility and take action where we can, because that's really what the future is. So I'm glad we're all on board to make a robust watershed and do what we can for the salmon. It's going to take all of us.
What was the attendance in 2012, the base year for visitation reduction statistics?
You have it. I haven't.
Believe it or not, 2012 was slightly busier by 1% than 2013. So 2013 was about 27,955, and 2012 was just a little more than that. So.
I'm sorry. 1989 August, there were 245,000 people, according to the data on your website, which corresponds to 7,829 or something. Basically what that tells me is that more than 8,000 people went on at least one day in August of that year. So please check your numbers and update your slides, because it's misleading when you say 6,000 is the busiest day we've ever had.
I don't want to repeat myself, but earlier I told you that in the 80s we didn't have a very good way of measuring the numbers of visitors, and today we have a very accurate count. So we'll try to put those little stars by those numbers, but please look at the figures that are much more recent as the gauge.
So when do those numbers start to become accurate, and how do we know which numbers are accurate and which ones are not accurate?
So we began to be able to accurately count our visitors when we started charging a fee. And we started in 1987, which September 87, and then we began dialing in our system in the years after that. So that's why prior to 89, we were just doing the road counters and the tire and the rough visitors per car, et cetera. And it was after we really dialed in our fee collection system that we have an accurate count. So please look at those. 1997, right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the cooperation that you're showing now. I do want to do a quick time check. It's 8:20, and we have lots of questions, so that's why we're trying to go through them as quickly as we can so we can get them answered. Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey got over $1 million for a scientific capacity study. Where did that money go? Now, just a minute. I'm supposed to see the reverse side. Watershed assessment. Okay. Who's answering?
I'm not sure. I might need a little help with the facts, but there were at least 3 or 4 studies that were done about carrying capacity, looking at visitation within the woods. Those were done, as Darren had mentioned earlier, by some of the preeminent scientists, social scientists, University of Vermont, University of Idaho, involved with understanding visitation in recreational areas across the United States. Those studies, we will make those available, and I think you'll appreciate the rigor associated with that kind of work. Working with Stillwater Associates, an independent scientific research organization, an assessment was completed of the entire Redwood Creek watershed looking at a number of indices, and analyzing the different reaches, segments of the watershed. That was completed in, I believe, in 2011, and that was also funded by this.
That was my question. So I can respond to the facts because I was present in the room when the agreement.
Louder.
I can respond to the facts because I was present in the room. I'm co-chair of the Downtown Task Force when the original agreement was made between Brian O'Neill, superintendent of NPS, and the county to both limit the parking along Muir Woods and to use the money that Lynn Woolsey appropriated for an independent, trustworthy capacity study. Now that did not happen. I know that because Brian Avila sent an email to answer that question in writing to a member of the Near Beach community, and of course that was forwarded to us.
Can I respond to that? My email addressed a very specific question that asked if there was a study related to foot traffic impacting Redwood routes. And
The question that we were asking is, if over $1 million was appropriated to do a scientific independent capacity study, where did that money go? Because what we have instead is marketing studies, traffic flow studies, customer satisfaction studies. We do not have an independent, scientifically verifiable, trustworthy capacity study.
He just said where it was.
Can I suggest that when we release this, in terms of us all having the same information, then that you can evaluate the work that was done by these scientists? We didn't know there was quite an audience for it. We're glad to release that information. It's it's kind of dense stuff, and but we'll be glad to release it. We think you'll find it to be independent. We think you'll find it to be rigorous, and these are the kinds of studies that are associated with carrying capacity. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I don't believe that these were peer reviewed. But they were done by 3 different scientists, so all understanding how the work was done by each other. So there's a small cadre of folks who are doing this kind of work.
There's a question here for our supervisors, and they have agreed to take it. NPS is taking the heat, but in fact the county, underlined, hasn't enacted common sense rules to ensure the protection of the wetlands that are watersheds, that are crucial to the survival of endangered species. The questions for the supervisors are: what is county responsibility to protect the watershed above Muir Woods to help the salmon, the coho salmon?
So the county is involved in a wide range of watershed efforts, watershed restoration and protection efforts around the county using our countywide plan. Many of you know that we have been working and trying to enact a reasonable stream conservation area ordinance. We also participated with the Park Service in the watershed capacity study going back over 10 years. We have been working on our on-site wastewater septic system regulations to be in compliance, which is a major consideration for fishery restoration, and we've done an inventory of all of the fish passage barriers on our coho-bearing streams. We have been most notably working in the Redwood Creek estuary down on Pacific Way to try to find a viable and cost-effective way to cross the Redwood Creek near the outlet there, and to do that in conjunction with the restoration project that the Park Service has taken on. We also recently received funding for replacement of the bridge on Franks Valley Road that we consider to be both a pedestrian and a fish passage issue. So we continue to work on fishery restoration issues throughout the county.
Can the Board of Supervisors make sure that tour buses and shuttles will not be permitted to drive through Tam Valley residential streets in an effort to avoid Shoreline Highway?
So the question is whether we can make sure that buses and shuttles won't be permitted to drive through Tam Valley residential streets. That is what Supervisor Sears and I have already been researching, and we believe, and our county council has given us information that gives us confidence that we do have the authority to limit and restrict tour buses on residential streets and arterial streets. And that is what we will be looking at. And if you mean the Homestead Valley streets that lead up to the mountain, we absolutely would include those in our work.
Have you considered using the vacant retail space and parking lot at Tam Junction as a hub visitor center for visiting Muir Woods, Muir Beach, Stinson Beach, and offering shuttles with stops at all of those places?
Yeah, we over the years, those of you who are involved with the CT&P, and it's actually gone up till the last couple of years. I mean, really, there's been an ongoing effort to figure out ways to find new ways to bring shuttle service. What we have found is, first, our shuttle system right now is really maxed out. We have 10 shuttles. We're running them as hard as we can. We have a facility that we use very well, and we fill it up. Really, we think that if we do get into Tam Junction even more, the impacts will not be worth the maybe a little bit more capacity that we might get out of it.
We answered no.
Thank you, Frank.
Is there an example of a place that has implemented a similar reservation system, and did it reduce visitors and traffic?
Say that again, sorry.
Is there an example of a place that has implemented a similar reservation system? Did it reduce visitors and traffic?
There are a few notable examples that we have. Statue of Liberty is one, like an island, obviously, so it's not the same. But there are others that have been coming online. Valor, the parking supply at Valor, which is USS Arizona over in Hawaii, as well as, and actually, reservation systems are becoming ubiquitous. They're just something that you can get on and you can do, and you can advance plan. The most recent one, when we were in a meeting with City of Sausalito, in order to address the bike issue of people swamping Sausalito, and they've just recently introduced a reservation system there, and my understanding is that it's working quite well. So it's really a way to manage traffic and to keep traffic at the flow that people can handle, the system can handle.
Can the Muir Woods parking area that was taken away, the area that was closest to the entrance, be at least returned to a parking area? At present, it is mostly a dirt lot, which is uneven to walk on, especially for the severely handicapped.
It's between me and I because this is one of our favorite topics. The plaza that we created has tremendous utility as a decompression zone for our visitors. So I don't want to just like sound the visitor experience bell, but it's really so helpful in terms of letting people sort out all of their preparations before they go into the woods. It's been remarkable, and MIA staff has come up with a lot of creative ways to utilize that space. We still maintain about a dozen accessible spaces in that area. We have right adjacent to that is the most constrained section of Redwood Creek, and our ambition is to relieve some of that constriction. It's the fastest velocity of creek, and it's up and or below, downstream and upstream of that is really good habitat. We'd like to further remove some of that asphalt area. We took the first step a couple of years ago, and we're just really pleased with it.
It goes back to our commitment for the health of the forest. By moving the parking away from the redwoods and away from the creek, we not only do better by the redwoods, but we also don't have all that urban bleed of car doors and horns honking in the redwood forest, so the wildlife have a better experience as well. So it's been a really good buffer zone.
Can you mention the work that was just done?
If you haven't been to Muir Woods in a little while, you'll see that we've just done some work on the plaza. We have put a special surface on it so that the dust problem, which of course was miserable to walk through, but also putting dust into the creek, has been eliminated. We've further redefined the plaza so that there's improved parking for ADA to make us compliant. We have added 2 electric vehicle charging stations, so bring your Tesla to Muir Woods. And we have actually added even a little bit more of the vegetated zone because we've changed how you approach the restrooms. You come to them from the plaza rather than from the creek side. So we've made a lot of improvements to the visitor flow there and the natural area.
We have to take. Yes. We have to take just a second here to make a decision about timing. It is 8:30 when we agreed that it would be finished. What we're trying to do is sort out the questions so you're not getting repetitions and entering new subjects. Jeff, our host is also upstairs. And Jeff, what about our being able to stay in the room? Are we okay? Okay. Well, we certainly agree to stay and answer these questions. And if we have to, we can also move outside and continue to answer them that way. So I very much appreciate.
Perhaps you have an independent person sifting through the questions.
Okay. And you're very welcome. You know, I can hear that concern about that. You're very welcome to look at the questions that have been put over here to the side that we thought were repetition that we didn't want to subject you to, but you're more than welcome to look at them, all of them. Can the Muir Woods parking area that was taken away? No, I just did that one. If someone makes a reservation to park at Muir Woods, how do you know how many people, including children, are coming? If you don't know, how do you enforce the daily limit, 4,000 or otherwise?
The question?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Sure. If someone makes a reservation to park at Muir Woods, how do you know how many people, including children, are coming? If you don't know, how do you enforce the daily limit, 4,000 or otherwise?
So that really comes back, we're using the best data that we have. Our data that we has says that we have on average 3.2 visitors per vehicle. That is just a starting point. This system is really going to need to be very closely monitored and adapted over time. When people come in, if we do start seeing more people than we expect than our models say, then we can reduce the number of vehicles that we actually release. So that's how we'll do it, and it's essentially monitoring and adapting to make sure we have the right level of visitation.
Excuse me, that's not the system they use at the Statue of Liberty, because I've been trying to get there, and I can't go on the ground because it's sold out 5 months in advance. Okay, you can't get a ticket up to the thing, you can't buy one until September, and it's been sold out for 4 months. So, but they charge every person, if you have to list out, every person that wants to go in your group on that system. And that's why it should be the system we're using here.
I think that cars that come in, we really want the number of people. So that means it should be selling out on tickets on a per hour basis. So if you have 1,000 spots per hour and you don't get filled, you should only sell 1,000 tickets per hour. That means that cars that come in and try and drop off the bathroom can't even come in. And that'll be a way of automating this whole parking mess, this infrastructure you're trying to build that is totally too bulky for this area you're trying to manage. You're not going to do all the gate entrance to Muir Woods. You're now putting an additional infrastructure in front of it to regulate that. You should have only like museums. You have a special showing, you go to the special show, we're sold out. Sorry, where do you walk? You walk home or you walk here? Where are you going?
Do you want me to?
Has the National Park Service consulted, in quotes, with the NOAA fisheries over the effect of the GMP, and particularly parking on Muir Woods Road, as required by Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act?
We did consult with NOAA Fisheries. We consulted with Fish and Wildlife Service, both. NOAA Fisheries is involved because of the salmon and anadromous fish. And we have a compliance letter that's published in the GMP from NOAA Fisheries that says we've completed compliance at this stage. It doesn't mean, though, that we're done with any consultation with them. We've also initiated consultations with them about this project, and we'll have continuing conversations with NOAA Fisheries as we implement various projects throughout the park. So at the GMP level, we have had adequate compliance as tested by a letter from NOAA Fisheries.
How will you prevent ticket scalping?
There were 80 red nests, and this year there were 5. There have been years in between 2007 and now where there were no coho that came in, and they came in, but there were no nests counted. So this is out of control. We're about to move the species under our watch and not leave anything to the next generation. One of the limiting factors in this is copper coming from rake pads. And rake pads put copper into the watershed because there's no checks and balances for runoff that's coming off the county road and the parking lot. So I just want people to know that the neurotoxin fish messes with their migration, it messes with their ability to breed, and their ability to detect whether or not there's a predator coming out of it. So it's much better than
Those of you that have been kindly standing, just a moment, those of you that have been kindly standing, there are lots of seats up in the front now.
More like you should be using the terminology almost extinct. Like the lady said, you have this very mild endangered. It sounds more like they're almost extinct. So then you say to yourself, is it possible that Muir Woods has gotten too big for its britches? There are plenty of places in the world where we all can't go visit, period. Maybe for years, we might have to reserve for years before we get to go visit a place because it's reached critical mass. Have you ever thought about that?
First, I'd like to...
Regardless of all the towns that are being gagged with the traffic.
First, I'd like to let you all know, those of you that have been kindly standing all evening, there are a lot of places empty now up in front if you'd like to rest your weary legs. Okay.
We really, really share your concern over the dire peril of the salmon. I just want to respond to you. We too frame it in just very emotional language, how we... This is true. And we are proud that in Redwood Creek is the last wild run of salmon in the lower 48.
Mia,
Nope.
can you answer this question? This flyer that was handed out by the Friends of Pam or whatever it is, are the numbers of the coho salmon accurate?
If they came from Laura, chances are they are. We need to, excuse me. We realize that the salmon have been perilously going downhill throughout the lower 48. Lagunitas Creek, Redwood Creek, there's none in San Mateo County anymore. It is a terrible situation. And that's why so much energy and focus is on the salmon fishery in the Redwood Creek watershed, because it is poised next to extinction. And that's the focus of our work, and it's also why we are considering dramatic measures to try to keep them from going extinct. We would love to share this with you. It's a major focus of what we're doing. There are people in this room that's their primary focus, whether it's in the nursery or our restoration at Muir Beach, our aquatic ecologists. We would love to have... We want to look at those figures. We want to look at what Laura has presented in terms of copper. We want to let everyone know how incredibly serious this is, so that during our life, we can make a difference in some way. We only have a little bit of control because it's the creek and there's the ocean and everything, but this is of utmost concern. So thank you for also making it central to what your concern is.
Yeah, I think a number of us would appreciate a very specific...
Thank you. We take it and we will do that. This is one of the most important things we talk about, and we will be very clear in what the language means.
So, Mia, I put in my question at the beginning of this whole question and answer series. Haven't heard anything. Another thing came up. And what I'm asking is, are these
explaining why the crash happened the first year that you started working at Muir Beach. I haven't seen an otter since you guys got done. I walk that beach every day. You guys got done with your parking lot. There's no otters.
So
there's no salmon. There's D9 dozers in the creek bed every once in a while, so you guys can improve the habitat. They don't need a hug. They need you guys to step away from them and leave them alone.
So the good news is that when we finally got rain this year in February, the salmon responded and they came upstream and spawned. The other good news is that there are smolts. Those are the one-year fish that are ready to go out to the ocean at Muir Beach right now. That's the good news. It's not great news because the numbers aren't great, but there is good news. Salmon came up to spawn this year, and the one-year smolts are ready to go out. That is good news. The otter cams in the creek record otters in a number of places in Redwood Creek, from Muir Beach to Muir Woods. There have been recent sightings. More good news. They're online on the River Otter Ecology Project's website. Now, there is a number of, we really need to have an evening on salmon. It's a very complex topic, and unfortunately, the bad news is it's not just Redwood Creek. It's all up and down the lower 48. You need to know this news. It's very dire, and there are many problems and many things to be concerned about, and it's worthy of a focused evening, and we would be glad to share it and bring in the experts to help you understand this. It's worthy of that topic. And unfortunately, we did not get the numbers ahead of time, but I would be glad to make sure that the Park Service fish ecologists and those that are in our county look at them and help us understand what they are. This is worthy of all of our attention. Ditto on the other endangered and threatened species.
So taking care of the salmon is all well and good, but I would really like to hear you talk about the impact of present visitation on all of the communities, people who are here, who are being affected in a very bad way. And I would like to hear you say that we do everything that we can to lessen this impact on the quality of your lives, and that all of these other implementations will work toward that end of lessening the present impact and not increasing the visitation in any way.
Okay, the next question is, how will you prevent ticket scalping?
What we're saying is we want a cap. We'd like a cap.
I think I did discuss this at the beginning about the quality of life in the communities, the quality of life in the park, and that the numbers that we've talked about throughout the evening, reducing traffic by 25 to 50% will have that effect. So we are trying to do this. You hopefully will be able to, we're trying to listen to you tonight. We hope that ultimately we can work together to try to implement some kind of a system like this to give this a shot.
Hey, Frank, the gist of my questions that I put up there concerning the amount of traffic going through, I had sidetracked by the salmon. I was talking to the traffic engineer at the last meeting that we had, and he told me that 15 to 20% of all the traffic, I'm sorry, 10 to 15% of all the traffic going through Tam Junction on any given weekend, is headed to Muir Woods. So how can you explain a dramatic drop in traffic for this community by having more buses just taking care of 15% of the traffic? It's just going to put a whole bunch more buses on the road. You've made no plans for turnouts. You've made no plans for, well, you have made plans for limiting the size of commercial buses. I met with a bunch of highway patrolmen the other day, and they're planning on doing a traffic scheme on your guys' buses going. Every bus that goes over the line, the guys are going to get a ticket. I think that's unfair because those guys are probably going to lose their job. But you guys have fostered a program of having buses come, go over the line, and you don't care. And the traffic in this community, you guys, of all the Federal Park employees here, how many of you live in West Marin going to the Tam Junction area? None. My point is, okay, that's great. That's great. But my point is, on any given weekend, the traffic is unbelievable. It's built up on the freeway out to Sausalito. These couple of new lights that have been installed by Caltrans, they've tried to make adjustments to the timing of them completely unsuccessfully. Because on any given weekday, during traffic times, There's traffic like you wouldn't believe. You guys have completely just clustered the whole thing. And you think that by reducing a little bit of traffic going into the actual park is going to reduce the amount of traffic going to GT&RA is ludicrous. Thank you.
I'll try to get the first part, and then Jenny can take the second part. You're right that even 10 or 15% through Tam Junction being Muir Woods, we know we're not the only problem, but we are trying to have a significant impact on Muir Woods destined visitation. We really think that this is going to reduce traffic loads. It's not going to solve Tam Junction problem. We don't want to leave that impression. We are saying that we will be able to very significantly reduce the hourly flows to Muir Woods. I'll let Jenny talk about the commercial tours a little bit, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, in addition to the stipulations in the commercial use authorization, we recognize that there are quality drivers, there are drivers that aren't so great, there are buses that are in good repair, there are buses that are safe, there are compliant companies, there are companies that are non-compliant. We actually periodically do partner with CHP to do exactly what you're discussing, where CHP has the authority to red tag buses if they're not safe for operation, to ticket, and we support those operations. We recognize that it would be a shame for a good driver to lose his job, certainly, but in general, we actually support that kind of operation because it assists us with making sure that the buses, when they're in the rest of the community, are abiding by the rules, driving within their lines, and operating safe equipment.
A simple follow-up question. You have the power to pull those permits from the non-compliant. Is that correct? How many permits from the non-compliant companies have been pulled?
We actually just recently did a study of the length of buses in the Muir Woods lot, and more than 90% were compliant. So while we understand that there are a lot of problems with the buses in community roads that they're not supposed to be on, in terms of their length limit and their compliance with our terms and conditions, they're highly compliant. So that's why we are encouraging the county and working with the county as they develop their ordinances to make sure that as a team we're supporting the goals that you're trying to reach with better management of commercial carriers.
Do you have the statistics available on exactly how many people and how many buses and how many people on average per bus come on the weekdays and on the weekends to Muir Woods? And would that be available to me? Doing the numbers work.
We don't have. We've requested the information from the tour operators. We have an annual number. They won't give proprietary information, which is really daily.
But you're not counting them then at this point.
No, we absolutely are. We have counts for them. We absolutely can give you the counts that we have at the gate. We don't have. I thought you were referring to each specific carrier. We have how many?
I'm not talking about the counts.
Oh, okay.
You have someone when the buses arrive that sees how many buses are coming commercial per day and the average number of people that are on those buses.
We have the number that have gone in the gate. I don't know if we have an actual exact. No, we do. We have an exact count. We can give you that information. Yeah, absolutely.
I will email you and I want you to respond to me. Will you please do so?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I will add that less than 10% of the visitors to Muir Woods come on tour buses. So not to minimize the issue with the size of the buses, the frequency you see them, I think the phenomenon that we're seeing that's really egregious is the hop-on, hop-off buses that are a recent phenomenon in the last few years. And the fact that they've been cutting through the neighborhoods in Tam Valley is outrageous. So we're working with the county on that, but it's really, the numbers are not huge on the tour buses, but obviously it's a big vehicle, and we are trying to make sure that they're in compliance with that and working with the county.
Right, one more bus neighbor.
Yeah, okay.
There had been a plan at one point to bring the buses into Warren area at Muir Beach. Is that still on the table?
No, not at all.
There's not going to be any bus.
No, there's no bus stop. There's no plan to go on Pacific Way into Muir Beach on the highway. Okay, yeah, there is. We do have a plan for a bus stop on Highway 1 at the Pacific Way intersection, crossing the mailboxes. And I believe the county is in support of that because it's for the West Marin stage. It's not for tour buses. And we can actually control, these other buses to not stop there.
So the sole bus will be the stage, it will be across from the...
That's the intent. Oh, I'm sorry. It's for the Muir Woods shuttle, right, okay. The capacity of the commercial buses? Well, I know we get an annual number, but I don't know if there's...
About 10%.
It's 10% of the visitation to Muir Woods. I just said it's less than 10% annually, but I don't have a specific...
Kinsey does.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
15 years ago, we were permitted to bring in 40-foot buses. That, there was a big upset about that. Now we can only bring in buses that are 35 feet or less. The buses that come in that are 35 feet or less can carry anywhere from 24 to about 35 people. And the important thing that I would like people to be mindful of is if you bring in a bus with 32 people, you just took 16 cars off the road. Somehow the buses are the victim, or the bad guys, and as a professional tour guide, I'm not sure why, but we actually reduce the number of cars that are on the road.
Thank you. And I think the issue sometimes that gets raised is if the buses are not fully occupied or not near capacity.
They are fully occupied.
Okay. We don't always see that, but all right.
This is a category of question that hasn't been asked, and there have been a couple of them, so I wanted to honor it. In the event of wildfire or other disasters, what is the NPS evacuation plan? Is it at all formalized, and where is it described in the general management plan?
Generally, this isn't the kind of thing that's addressed in the general management plan, but Muir Woods works very closely with the Throckmorton Fire Station and receives good support from the Muir Beach Volunteer Fire Department for a whole variety of different emergencies that may happen. We have an emergency plan for staging, response, overnight accommodations, backup emergency communications. We have trained staff, et cetera. This is always an area to be improved with, and that's one reason we want to work closely with our state park colleagues and our local fire departments to make sure we're prepared for whatever might happen.
How will you prevent ticket scalping, as goes on at Half Dome? Will people on buses have tickets?
There certainly is a large problem with ticket scalping in other national parks, other reservation systems. I think we would certainly look to our colleagues in other parks or in other reservation systems at what tools they're using to prevent ticket scalping. In our own park and in other parks that are neighbors, there are systems with ticketing, and there are policies and management practices in place to prevent ticketing. And Judy, what was the second half of that question?
Ticket scalping goes on at Half Dome, and will people on buses have tickets?
Yes, so actually I should back up and say we are learning quite a bit from the Half Dome experience. As you know, that was another place where there previously had been no reservation system in any way. You could just go when you wanted to, and there were some real problems, including many deaths. And so they instituted a pilot program, which has now become instituted in a formal way permanently. And so we are going to be able to learn from their experiences, since we are in a similar situation of instituting a reservation system where there previously wasn't one.
I have a question. May I ask a question? I'm very naive about how all this process works, but I'm just really curious. Maybe you can answer this, Frank. Can these plans be implemented without the approval of the supervisors, or how does that work?
Frank, do you?
This whole...
Oh, the general, okay, that's not me, the general management plan.
Well, the general management plan is our federal plan for the federal park, so it is really our planning process, and it's approved by myself and my supervisor, regional director for the Western U.S. So obviously we've had a lot of buy-in over the years and participation by comments by the county, but they're not approving officials for this.
Thank you. I have a supplemental. Steve Kinsey has explained to our community on several occasions that because the county owns the road, that none of these plans for increased asphalt alongside Goodwood Creek can happen without the consent and cooperation of the Orange County Supervisor. So ultimately, aren't they making these decisions?
So again, the general management plan is a very broad kind of umbrella document. It doesn't prescribe or authorize specific actions or
We're talking about specifically tonight.
right, but you were asking me about the general management plan. About what? Okay. All right. We were talking about GMP, so we just switched gears. So if you're talking about the reservation system, yes, obviously we need to work with the county because it's a county road that leads you to Muir Woods, and we're obviously asking for some parking rights or permission along that road. So yes, the county concurrence is key to some of the numbers we've talked about here tonight.
Frank, can I?
Yes.
So I just want to clarify one thing. There's no plans for additional asphalt in any way along that stretch, just to nip that in the bud. But we really do feel that the county allowing us to have additional abilities to control the roadside parking, which is currently unmanaged, is fundamental to this system, and that's why we have been working with the county, which, as they've mentioned, they'll be holding hearings on, but it really is fundamental for the entire system to work. Because if we can't actually limit who is parking along the roadside, if we can only limit who is coming to our parking lots through a reservation system, then there's still the same chaos along the roadway. We need to be able to limit people both at the roadside as well as our parking lots, as well as, more importantly, shift the entire mode of everyone's thinking about how they visit Muir Woods to the fact that they need an advance reservation and that once they're sold out, they just can't come.
So the question about managing the roadside, my understanding is that any copper in the creek does severe damage to the fish. Any parking along the roadside is damaging. Our numbers, the numbers that several people have collected, analyzed, looked at, and presented to your team and to the supervisors again and again and again, show that if you choose a sustainable limit and a very small increase in the shuttles, you don't need any roadside parking at all. That's number one. Number two is ticket and tow. How much is towing? No parking, tow away zone ticket. $150 per car? Okay, $100 a car. Let's raise it. $150 a car. Now, tow every single person who parks along the side of the road, because there are signs that say, if you park here, you will be towed. And use some of your boots on the ground to tell them to their face, if you park here, you will be towed. You know what? Tow 50 people away at a time, and nobody else will park there. I promise you.
We've been working to ensure that the language in the agreement that we're working on with the county at the staff level that will soon be moving forward for review and public comment is ensuring that we will have the ability to ticket and tow.
But the question I'm asking is, why do you need any control over that road at all? That's a county road. We have sheriffs. The sheriffs can go down there, ticket and tow.
So Luke, we'll take that as a comment. We have a few more cards and we're running out of time. So.
Your plan should not include roadside parking in the first place.
Frank suggested just a minute ago that we certainly strive for 9 o'clock, which is a couple of minutes, and the park people will be delighted to stay and answer questions or talk with you one-on-one. So I wanted to, Howard has come up with some questions that have not been asked, so I wanted to answer a couple of them, ask them quickly. Almost 2 years before implementation of reservation system, what happens in the meantime? The numbers of visitors continue to rise and traffic worsens.
That's the problem.
The problem is we have no ability, no tool to keep people from coming to the woods. That is the challenge, and people will continue to come down looking for their experience. You talk to everybody that we talk to says again and again and again, the first thing people say when they come into San Francisco Bay is, I want to go to Muir Woods. It's insatiable, the demand for it. So I suggest that we look and think about the power of this tool and putting in place that you actually need to advance ticket for a reservation. So
are we too cheap? I mean, just as a basic starting point, if we raise our entry fee to something that's a little bit, you know, push down attendance a little bit and make it slightly more exclusive in peak hours, on peak days.
I'll let Frank touch that one.
Immediate approach.
Yeah, let me, Frank is probably the best person to talk about that.
Your point is to adjust the fees to cover the cost of the
Peak times, in peak months, like anywhere else. I mean, if you go on the London Eye, it costs you £20. It's a 40-minute experience, that's about $35. Is $7 or whatever you quoted, entry, actually realistic? And are we creating number problems because we're too cheap? And if we have high-impact days and months that we're trying to resolve parking and traffic issues over, then hoik up the prices.
So you're describing something called dynamic pricing, and I think, you know, as we have, well, yeah. So when there's more demand or there's more pressure, you can charge more. We don't have the authority for that at this time, but with this fee increase that might be coming next year, there will be, you know, an opportunity to weigh in, and I would suggest that we comment on that, because we have asked in the past for that, but there's been no comfort level with Washington to do that. Not here, we haven't asked, but just in general, it's been suggested, but it's part of the culture, I think, of these are public lands, the people pay taxes already, you know, so there's a reluctance to make it market price. Yes. Right, I understand, yeah. Right. So we don't have that authority at this point, but it's a good idea to consider.
What?
It can be confusing. Yeah. Okay. We'll take two more questions, and then we're going to go to one-on-one. We'll adjourn for the night. Yes, sir. You've been having your hand up.
So, by my ballpark calculation here, back in the envelope, for the 110 parking spaces along the creek, you would be charging somewhere between $7 and $15. Well, you know, that ends up 365 days a year. Ends up $1.4 million, and at the $15 price, it ends up about $3 million. Who's going to get the revenue on those prices? Because that's county territory.
So we've hired a financial consultant to build up the model of what this will cost to run the system, including things like additional law enforcement that will be necessary, including the boots on the ground that we've described, the additional staffing, including sustainable support of the shuttle system, which right now is currently subsidized by the county and by the Park Service, the running of a reservation system, and a call center. And so the financial consultant is doing a build-up for us to look at all those costs, doing a lot of market research, talking with people that are in those industries to help us understand the cost of the system, and the rate is being set so that we can make sure that that's sustainable. So the money is like going to fund the system, basically.
Sure.
We're not talking about any infrastructure improvements in this project. We're actually reducing roadside parking, but there is no infrastructure improvement in this project. It's existing infrastructure only.
Okay, you have been standing for some time. That'll be our last question, and we'll close the meeting and go to conversations here or outside if you wish.
My concern is that I feel like we're talking about the cart before the horse, and I'd like to press the horse for a minute. Your general management plan, which you've actually contradicted quite a few times tonight, so I don't know if it's set or if it's not set. But according to your general management plan, line 1, after the approval of this plan, then you will be doing studies that will investigate the baseline conditions of resources and visitor use in the park. At the same time, you're saying that the visitor use, visitors will be, that the resources will be highly vulnerable to visitor use. And then you go on to say elsewhere in the general management plan that 4% of the park's total staff working in Natural Resources Management and Sciences Division, that the current staffing levels prevent the park from completing the very baseline studies and monitoring necessary to guide the park's natural resources preservation efforts into the future, in spite of the fact that central to ecosystem management is long-term monitoring of changes in the condition of the natural resources and the related human influences. So I want to know, when are you going to do that study? It should be before you set any reservation system, because that in turn encumbers certain numbers that you set. You need to know what the carrying capacity is, and it's quite obvious from these quotes from your own plan that you do not have a handle on the carrying capacity of your woods.
I'm not sure entirely where you're getting that. It sounds like you're reading from the. It sounds like you're reading from. It sounds like you're reading from the.
She did. I know for a fact she did. She read every single page, probably twice for a lot.
Can I respond? So there is a no action alternative, and the no action states the case where we are short of staff to enable us to do the kinds of studies that we'd like to do to implement certain projects. The GMP also proposes increases in staff to allow us to do additional analyses that will be required to implement projects that were identified in the GMP. So I'm not quite sure where your comments are. We certainly anticipate doing additional studies, such as analyses for this project, in order to to implement projects. So we don't have all the information available on all of the projects that were identified in the GMP. There's going to be continued investigations. There are going to be continued communications with the community about these projects as we define them going into the future. So. And I would suggest that we do understand those.
I think the issue. I think we have to try something. If we wait, as someone asked a moment ago, what happens in 2 years, or what happens in the intervening 2 years, the visitation will continue to go up. We have to try something.
You have a limit today. 750,000 people. It's what you agreed to in 2005. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. 2,100 people a day maximum. You don't need any roadside parking. Just stop it. That's it.
We have, without a reservation system.
People, fine. Start there, then do the study. It's that simple.
All right. Well, all right. We're gonna.
Well, I just wanted to mention that in going back through the records of the CTMP, I can find no agreement on just about anything. The process seemed to conclude in an agreement to just suspend the project. I can't find any agreement that references 750,000 visitors. I can't find agreement to pursue different projects. The Park Service did do the carrying capacity analysis that were suggested as part of the CTMP, did do the watershed assessment, did realign Diaz Ridge Trail, and a number of other initiatives that were suggested in the CTMP, but I can't find anything. The IJ report is not necessarily an agreement that is a binding agreement. I think you'd agree that and we have done the capacity study. I think what you're suggesting is that there was an agreement to cap visitation at 750,000 that was done, that was made in 2005, and I've not been able to find anything, nor have the rest of our colleagues.
Was a customer satisfaction study of the kind that would be done at Disneyland, where everything is made out of concrete. What you did not do was a study that takes into account the complete environmental picture, including what the heck happens to all of the communities adjacent. Now, Mr. Dean, you wrote an article that went in the Marin Independent Journal saying, we want to be good neighbors. So do the study. And the study, I'm pretty sure, will show you're not being good neighbors. When you've got a room full of people, standing room only, who are telling you you're not being good neighbors, I think you need to go back and forget about how many people can we cram into Redwood Disneyland. Just throw those numbers out because they're not useful. Then talk about number of people who are getting shoved through the narrow country road known as Highway 1, and what is happening to the trees and the salmon and the adjacent state parks and all of the wilderness in the area. Because I think what you did is, when do the customers get irritated as opposed to how much can the land handle? And that's what we're asking for. And I don't think it's a hard question.
Okay.
If you're the National Park Service, I think you can figure out how to get a study like that.
Okay, I think we've heard from you. I think, as was described by the attorney earlier, I think we need to have a common data set. You guys have been throwing some numbers around. We have numbers. I think it would be helpful and productive over the summer to compare notes and try to get to a common set of facts and numbers. Just in the interest of time, I know this has gone long, and I appreciate your patience. So we're going to call it a wrap. I thank you for coming. We're going to take the comments we've heard and incorporate them to try and refine our thinking. We'll come out with a more detailed version of this later in the summer for public comment. But I will offer maybe a more in-depth conversation about how the carrying capacity questions you've raised, the studies that we've done. We'll be happy to share those with you. There was a website. If you have additional comments you want to share, it's parkplanning.nps.gov/muwo-parking. So I think we'll call it a night, but thank you again for coming.
Here, let me come to you.